I'm Marcia, and I'm going to introduce my co-presenters today in a moment. How many of you have been to Oaxaca? Oh, quite a few, quite a few. Well, we've been talking about this presentation, and people have in the streets and around town have said, "I've never been to Oaxaca. What's it like?" So, perhaps by the end of this talk today, you'll know a little bit more about Oaxaca. Those of you who've been there, and those of you who have not, will be introduced to one of the most interesting states of Mexico and one of the most interesting cities, I think. I'll introduce our first presenter next. Also presenting with us today are Kay and Dean Michaels. They are currently new residents of Ajijic, having moved here last year, and they lived in Oaxaca de Juarez, the main capital city, for 7 years, almost 7 years before moving here. I lived in Oaxaca for 5 years, exactly 5 years before moving here in January. And our first speaker is Enaj Schlak, who has been coming to Ajijic for dozens of years. Her family has been here, and her sister has a home here now. And she lives in Ajijic now with her husband, and has is very active in some local groups that are going to be very interesting to you, I think. So our first presenter is Enaj Schlak.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. My twin sister lives here, and I have deep roots to Ajijic and the Lake Chapala area. We've been coming down here. My parents moved down here in the early 90s. Wow. So it's been wonderful. In Oaxaca, we have a wonderful library. It doesn't take up a whole city block like this does, that's filled with gardens, but it's a lovely resource, and it was really one of the reasons my husband and I decided to move there, because the library is so rich, and we also have a lending collection. It's called the Oaxaca Lending Library, and lots of programs as well. But I'm not going to talk about the Oaxaca Lending Library. I want to tell you about a fundacion. It's called Envia, and they give microloans to women. And it started in 2008 as a pilot program. The founders, Carlos Tapete and Emily Behrens, he's from Oaxaca, she's from the States. It started, they wanted to empower communities outside of Centro, because Oaxaca is, it's a tourist destination, mostly for other Mexicans, but most of the tourism stays in Centro. And they thought, well, and that's who benefits, is in Centro. And they thought, if we could just get some of the tourists into the villages and to see where the handicrafts come from, because Oaxaca is known for handicrafts. Oh, look at this, I didn't set my timer. Okay. Where the handicrafts come from, and talk to some of the women or the people that make the handicrafts, that will be a very enriching experience for them. So they started looking for women to do this with, to give microloans. Well, the women didn't believe. Microloans are readily available. I'm going to jump ahead and just say microloans are readily available in Mexico, but the average rate of return of interest is 76%, and it can go as high as 200%. So the women, a lot of women, it's like, we don't trust this. What, interest-free? You know, this is a hook for some kind of crime. And Mexico is among the highest in the world. The average, the overall average in the world is 35%. And the United States, I think it's like 13%. So Envia started like, let's get the tourist dollars out of Centro into the communities, and by doing that, we're empowering the communities, and what we'll do is we'll give loans, interest-free loans to women. Now, women exclusively, because statistically women will reinvest the money into community, into family well-being, and that's what's happened. And they call that, and VIA calls that responsible tourism, because I'm not making sense, okay, sorry. Part of the program, so microfinance is one of the programs, and they give interest-free loans to women, entrepreneurs. They do that by providing tours to tourists who go see the women entrepreneurs. And that's called responsible tourism, because both ends are benefiting. The women benefit because they're taking a step back from their daily lives to reflect on what they've accomplished with their business. And the tourists benefit because they're seeing a way of life in Mexico that the average tourist does not see. So, and the tourist money goes to providing the loans. So the Envia process, Envia work, Oaxaca is surrounded by valleys, 3 primary valleys. One valley is called the Tlacalula Valley. That's where Mitla is, there are ruins. And the other is Etla, which we consider that's kind of where the water is. And then there's the Central Valley. Well, Envia works exclusively in the Tlacalula Valley. And that valley has a very rich tradition of weaving and clay, working with clay. So Envia works with 6 different communities in the Tlacalula Valley, and is currently working with about 200 women venturing a business, and has given about over 4,000 loans since its inception in 2010. The process starts for the women. Everything is word of mouth, and everything takes place in the community. So these communities are typically like 31, 35 kilometers from the central city, Oaxaca de Juarez. And so it's word of mouth. If you have something you want to start, the first thing a woman needs to do is find 2 other partners. Now those partners don't have to be in the same business, but they're compadres. They work together to support each other. So they go through the process together. They don't have to have the same business. They don't have to know each other. Or, on the other side, they can be family members, mother, daughter, whatever. So they can be families. After you find your group of 2 other women, you take some business courses for, it's business literacy, or financial literacy, for 8 sessions. The 8 sessions take place over a month, so it's twice a week for an hour in the villages. And it really is financial literacy, because most of one thing about the microloans is they're typically giving loans to people who have no collateral, no credit history, people who don't have access to traditional banking sector. And that applies to the women in Oaxaca. So the first loan is for 1,500 pesos. That's a little bit less than $80. The second, you can receive that loan after you attend the business courses. And those business courses tell you how to separate the business money, how to separate the business from household money. They have a very specific box system. One is household, one is business expenses, one is profits, the other is savings. So they're teaching a very hands-on, concrete system of keeping financial records. Well, the second loan is 2,500 pesos, and every loan you get, they go up to 7,000 pesos. If you have online banking, it can go up to 10,000 pesos. And after that first loan, you have 10 to 13 weeks to pay it back. And VIA will only accept the payment if all 3 women make a payment. Now the least, if somebody has a bad week and they can't do it, your partners can cough up the money. And to hold your place in good standing is 20 pesos. If nobody in your group can come up with the money to make a payment that week, you would be, every person in the group would be fined 60 pesos. And that would keep you in good standing. If you have 3 times of like defaulting on your interest, whatever, you can still borrow money, but it's 500 pesos less. So instead of 2,500, it would be 2,000, and it goes on like that. Most of these women, most of these towns, I think out of 6 towns, I think at least 3 or 4, there are no banks. I mean, these are very small villages. The biggest is Teotitlan, and that's got a population of about 3,000. The smallest has a population of maybe 600. So they're very, very small. The difference between Envia and, let's say, another organization that we've all heard of that gives cows and goats and this and that to other people, is that Envia provides support. So Envia, every week, well, the staff is very small. The staff is 8 people, including a driver. But every week they're going out to the villages and collecting the money for the loans, the payback. And that provides support as well. So how are you doing? So that kind of support has made a huge difference for the women. Most of the craft stuff is interesting because the women who have been involved in, let's say, weaving or pottery, they've grown up with that. Everybody in their family is a weaver. In this one town, Teotitlan, everybody knows how to weave. They start weaving when they're 7, but they don't know about business. That is the thing. They know how to weave, but they don't necessarily know how to market and sell the stuff. So what ends up happening to a lot of the women, a lot of families, I should say, is they sell to what's called the big houses, and that's like a distribution center. Well, they can sell their rug there, their tapete there, but they're not getting top dollar for it. So there are, in addition to the business courses, there are monthly meetings of business meetings, and those are just educational programs. It might be on menopause, it might be on diabetes, it might be on organic fertilizers or worm composting, or of course computers and marketing. How do you do this? And at one point there were English classes. Now there are no English classes. So they've started other programs besides the microloans. They've also started Growing Strong, that encourages people to either raise chickens for the eggs or to start a family garden. Because during the pandemic, everything of course shut down, and people who didn't have an independent food source did a lot worse than people who did have an independent food source. So they started these Growing Strong programs, and you could have it either, but you have to know what do you do with the chickens? What happens when they're sick? What do you feed them? So they're providing ongoing support. And then another real popular program is the cochinilla program. And cochinilla is a larvae that grows, the larvae grows on the panel of an opalis cactus. It looks like a white speck of chalk, but it's used, if you harvest it at the correct time, the enzymes are a bright, beautiful red, and they use that for natural dyeing. there's been a push to use natural dyeing as opposed to synthetic dyeing because it doesn't harm the environment. You know, you're not introducing pollutants into the water table. And so even though the synthetics are cheaper, there's been a push to use the natural dyes. They also go to, so women can have businesses, all kinds of businesses. I'll just close with this one thing. There's this one woman in a small town. She said, I'm going to open a hardware store. And her husband's like, that is ridiculous. Nobody is going to buy hardware from a woman. You know, what do you know about construction? And now, she started selling one thing, like one spade, one rake, through the kitchen window. Then it became a kitchen door. Well, now it's a store, and the husband says, yes, that's our hardware store. And two other people in the village, now it's a small village, like less than 1,000 people. Two other people opened hardware stores. One was an architect. And he thought, well, if she can do it, it must be so easy. Well, he's now selling his inventory to her because it's not so easy. So the women are amazing. It's an amazing, amazing tour. Do I have time? Oh, okay. I just want to tell you, some of the villages are operated under what is called usos and costumbres. The Mexican government does not regulate what goes on in the village. The village regulates it. Well, they regulate the water rights, the forestry rights, as well as criminal and civil cases. And everybody in the village participates. Well, as a consequence, Mexico is #1 in the world for reforestation in the world because the indigenous communities are managing it. They're not overcutting or whatever. They're managing. But that said, water is a real crisis in Oaxaca. So I think I've told you enough. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this wonderful organization. It is a real success story. The women are truly inspiring. And it is wonderful to get into the villages outside of Centro, because it's a different world. It's quite wonderful. But with that, I've taken more than my time, and I want to introduce some other movers and shakers. Well, I'm not a mover and shaker. I just whatever. I want to introduce some movers and shakers who used to move and shake in Oaxaca. Now they're shaking it here, or they will be shaking it here, because that's just who they are. Kay, are you going to go first, Kay? Sure. Kay Michaels. Please help me.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Kay Michaels. Dean and I moved here just a few months ago, but we lived in Oaxaca for close to 7 years. I'm going to bring you back to Central, since Enaj took you out to the villages, which is fine, and talk to you about a food tour that we started in Oaxaca, and then that'll go into the lovely topic of food, because I'm sure a lot of you are interested in that, or at least people always ask us about that. So we moved to Oaxaca in 2018 with the plan of staying for 2 years. One, so I can become fluent, in Spanish, and the other for Dean to study mezcal, which he'll talk to you in a little while. He was in the wine business, and so he had an interest in that. Well, about 4 months in, Dean looks around, and also Dean, for fun on the weekends, had been a tour guide for a food tour business in North Carolina, where we're from, in Durham, called Taste North Carolina. So we're walking down the street one day, and he's like, I cannot believe that Oaxaca is the gastronomic capital of Mexico, and they don't have a walking food tour. And so we decided to start a walking food tour. And the way we started the process was, of course, Dean had all the nuts and bolts that we needed, but neither of us liked to cook, so we ate out all the time. And so people ask us, well, how did you choose your restaurants, you know, to be on your tour? And it all started with because we ate out all the time, and we liked the restaurants that we liked, the way we would go to. And we knew that at this time in 2018, Oaxaca was on the rise again, and you know, people were coming, and you can Google and you can find the top 5 restaurants in Oaxaca. And we didn't want to kind of go that route. We wanted to focus on the places we like to eat, which we don't all go out to Bruno's every night for dinner. You know, we go to our little local taco stand or something like that. And so we started asking the owners of the restaurants, the small restaurants that we liked, if they would like to be a part of our food tour. And they had absolutely no idea what we meant by a walking food tour. And so when we got the places selected, we actually took them on practice tours, and they were so that they can get an idea of what the tour would be like. Now, neither Dean or I are fluent in Spanish, and we had no desire to come in to Oaxaca and act like we were experts on culture or food. So, of course, we hired local. And we hired young local guides who were bilingual, and we trained them, and they joined us in the tour. And we also, another important thing, we wanted it to be not, if any of you have been on a walking food tour before, sometimes you stop, you're standing outside the restaurant and you're eating really quickly and then you move on. But we wanted to reflect the pace of life in Oaxaca, which is slow. And so we developed a tour that's 4 stops in 4 hours. And we wanted to highlight specifically, we wanted to give back to our community, to these friends that we'd gotten, people we'd gotten to know in all these restaurants, that we wanted them to share what their tradition and their food. And so we would ask them to come out, the chef or the manager, and talk about what their name meant and what the food they were serving. So anyways, I feel like I'm getting off topic. So we had the restaurants together. Tell me if the room. We got the restaurants together, we got the guides, and we started this tour. And we were doing great, and then COVID hit. And so like everything, we closed down for COVID. Now, after COVID, we started back again, and we decided that we really didn't want to start over again. And so we transferred our food tour service to one of our guides, and Lorena is now the new owner of Oaxaca Eats Food Tours. And so some of what makes our food tours special are that we support, with your ticket purchase, 5% of the donation goes to support 2 local charities. And right now, or they have been, one is the Historic Organ Society in Oaxaca, and they're having an organ festival right now, in case it's every other year, 2 years, if you'd like to go. And then we also support it's called Esperanza Infantil. You know, in Mexico, that if your family can't afford to buy a uniform for school, then you don't go to school. And so the proceeds from the ticket sales go to Esperanza Infantil to help families buy uniforms, to buy supplies, and then their kids can go to school. So not only do we support, and I say we because not anymore, because it's not our business anymore, it's Lorena's, but Oaxaca Eats Tours supports the community not only through these two organizations, but we also we keep the profits within the community, and that's what we always wanted to do. But we hire local. When we started, we hired local. She still does. We pay probably one of the best wages in Oaxaca for a guide, and we also, unlike some tours that had taken place before, and probably still do, a tour guide will walk into a place and tell people about it, and they'll walk out, and the chocolate shop or whatever receives nothing. And so the Oaxaca Eats Tour, we pay for the food, all of the food and drink, and then we pay the tip for the waiters, so they're also reimbursed. And then we also limit our footprint, because you can go online and buy the ticket, and we don't have any tickets, and it's a walking tour, so you're walking around town. So anyways, I hope that doesn't sound like it is kind of a plug for Oaxaca Eats, but it's also that we came with it. I wanted to share our story through that sense of activism and wanting to help the community, and it has helped the community, and the partners, they all benefit from it, and we love going back to Oaxaca and seeing them. They're like family to us. So that's a little bit about Oaxaca Eats food tours, if you so want to get involved in something like that, if you go. Now, switching onto food and drink, people always ask us here, like, so what's different? Why'd you leave Oaxaca? And what's different about it? And I'll just say it's different. I mean, the food is obviously very different, but I think one of the things that stands out for me here is that in Oaxaca, you're going to get corn tortillas most of the time. Flour tortillas are not very big. So corn is big. And talk about activism. I mean, Oaxaca they fight mightily to keep GMO corn and to keep heirloom corn and to share seeds, and they're very protective of their traditional food, and corn being one of the most important things. The other thing that is different, that Oaxaca is known for, is, I would say, holy moly. I mean, you might hear that there's 7 different types of mole in Oaxaca, but I would say for every grandmother there is in Oaxaca, they have a different type of mole. And so, you know, the dark mole, or fiesta mole as they call it there, which you might be most familiar with, you're going to have lots of different ones. So I encourage you, if you're going to travel, to try the different moles. Another thing, this is my only audio visual, thank you. So does anybody know what a tlayuda is? These are, okay, 2 people. So tlayudas look like this. I mean, they're this big, okay? This is a pizza. And some people call them a Mexican pizza, but I would not denigrate a tlayuda by calling it a Mexican pizza. But it is similar in shape. And then, so you slather rendered pork fat, called asiento, on the whole tortilla, which is crispy. It's a large crispy tortilla. And then you add beans and shredded quesillo cheese, which you might have seen in the ball, and lettuce and tomato and avocado. And then on top, another true delicacy of Oaxaca, tasajo, which is a salted beef, or cecina, which is pork in a chili. Oh, sorry. Or maybe even chorizo. So these are really popular, and then they fold them in half, and you can cut them, and they're huge. So if you go, I would suggest that you share them. And another thing you might not know about Oaxaca is and you really should seek them out, are the beverages of Oaxaca. You know, you have fruit waters here, agua frescas. A guy wrote a book from 90 beverages in Oaxaca, but there are lots more. The probably the most popular and interesting one is called Tejate, which is a cacao and corn drink. It's an energy drink that goes way back. And so if you were in Oaxaca, I would certainly try the different beverages. Atole as well. Atole comes in all kinds of different flavors. And so speaking of beverages, I'll turn it over to Dean, and hope you enjoyed that little bit about how we did our part, a little part of activism in Oaxaca with our food tour business, and it continues on. And if you guys have any questions, we're happy to answer anything if you're going to Oaxaca, just let us know. Oh yeah, and we do have a handout of some of our favorite restaurants and and food stands, yeah, street food in Oaxaca, okay? Thank you.
All right, enough about the activism and helping the community out. We're here to talk about the differences between mezcal and tequila. You guys are probably familiar with some of that, one side or the other. Oh, okay, sorry, yeah. I can almost do this without it anyway. One of the things that I think is, one of the sayings in Oaxaca is, you know, for all things bad, mezcal, and for all things good, again, mezcal. So this is a piece of the culinary circle, if you will, excuse me, of Oaxaca, keeping mezcal really, really close at hand, and lots of different varieties of it. What I would say is, if you're a mezcal, if you wanted to become a mezcal drinker, probably you would better start as maybe a bourbon drinker or a scotch drinker, because it doesn't seem like mezcal is going to be the thing that puts you over into that pure high alcohol, 50% of alcohol. Mezcal is pretty strong, and a lot of people are afraid of it because of it's so smoky. But that typically comes from the production process. Whereas tequila, for instance, is done, you've seen tequila fields obviously around here, all that blue agave, that's one type. Mezcal, there are about 40 different types of mezcal, and 80% of the world's mezcal is produced in Oaxaca. So there's many types. Some are smoky, some are less smoky, but they are cooked in an earthen pit. You'll have these molten hot rocks that have been fire red. They'll dig down, that'll be the basis of it. On top of that, they'll put the piñas, the hearts of the agave, and they'll cook them on top of that. From there, then they'll put a layer of plastic over that, at which point, on top of the piñas, they'll take some of the spent fibers from the previous burn that they did, and it's kind of soaking wet fiber, and then they'll put that over the top of it to sort of steam it in a little bit in the cooking, because you don't really want fire, you just want warmth and heat. And so then over that you put the plastic, and then from there you put dirt on it, and by then now you've got a pit that's not a hole in the ground, it's a conical shape. So that goes for about 4 or 5 days. Eventually the hot rocks have cooked it, and then you dismantle it, and you sort of put all the different types of varieties in one pile, and the other type in another pile. And they typically distill them completely separate from one another. It's when you find a blended mezcal, it's because they've taken the single batches that they've done and put them together later on. In tequila, you have the cooking process is primarily done like in a pressure cooker or a steamer. So you don't get that flame, that heat, that fire or that smokiness that you come up with. Unfortunately, being the fact that tequila being only from one variety of agave, and by the way, tequila is under the bigger umbrella of mezcal. It's just one type of the mezcal. So the cooking process changes a lot. But with one variety and the same cooking process, and in order to do the fermentation, which changes the starches, or excuse me, the sugars of the plant into the, excuse me, starches into the sugars, you know, you're going to allow the fermentation to get up to like a level where wine is, like around 14%. And then from there, then you'll do some distillation of that, which takes it much, much higher. Usually it's a double distillation, you'll see. It's the same way in mezcal, but with the mezcal, the difference being is that in tequila you inoculate with a laboratory-induced yeast, which just gives it consistency. One type of agave, the same type of food processing, and one yeast culture makes it very homogeneous, very, very same. Whereas mezcal, they allow the natural yeast that's in the particular area. In fact, in wine, you might know it as terroir. You know, being able to taste a specific type of flavor from, you know, the atmosphere. So the natural yeast that falls into the vats is what starts the fermentation process. In wine, if you let that happen, which some people do, chances are that wild yeast is very unpredictable and it might stop right in the middle of things. And if that happens, then you got to figure out a way to get it started pretty soon, or that whole year's worth of work is gone down the drain. So with the fermentation process, it's just really, really, really slow, and eventually all that yeast start catching on, and eventually you start getting to the point where it gets to that 14%. And then you do the double distillation there. So that's one of the biggest things that kind of goes on. Mezcal can only be named mezcal because it's a protected name. Tequila is a protected name. But mezcal becomes more about the agaves themselves, and where tequila is more about a place, specific place here in Jalisco. The mezcal is starting to become more industrialized, kind of like tequila is, in that they have the one type that is consistent and it grows, it's the fastest growing of the types. And the same thing happens in mezcal. To be able now to keep up with the world's demand, you have to find something that grows pretty quickly. And theirs is called espadín, whereas tequila is the Weber Blue Agave. Espadín, after about 7 years, is mature. It grows very fast and ferments very fast to try to keep up with the demand of the world. But where the uniqueness of mezcal comes from are some of those 30 different types that usually are not cultivated but found in a wild format. So instead of having big rows of agave like you would see all around here, you might have to forage and go find some type, some of the higher elevations. You find some up here, some over there. And all of these things it takes a little bit of a time and a lot of effort, and hence it was considered for a very, very long time just the poor man's mezcal. Just the poor man's drink. And in terms now, we find this uniqueness, this different character. The more you introduce yourselves to the different varieties of mezcal, if you're not so scared about the espadín, which happens to be the one that's the most smoky because it's such a fast grower, you might find yourself enjoying them a little bit more, excuse me. And I guess the last thing I want to mention about it is the alcohol content really changes. We talked about mezcal, the pure mezcal that you would sip, it's not a shooting type product, not like tequila. You don't have girls with belts with shot glasses on running around. It's very, very specific, it's very high in alcohol, and you don't really want to throw it down because it's going to burn on the way. But those are typically around anywhere from between 45 and 52% alcohol. And whereas, so those, that's like I said, that's not the thing you're just going to gravitate to immediately. But there is a school that, if for instance, if you go to Oaxaca and you go to one of the palenques or you go outside the region, you're going to get a chance to taste mezcal like this, in this higher form. if you just are staying in the city and you're walking down the pedestrian walkway, what you're going to find is you're going to find a lot of people that are going to be trying to have you taste some mezcal. Some of it's going to be colored pink and yellow, and then some of it's going to be creamy, but most of that's going to be in the range of around 35 to 38% alcohol, which is seemingly fairly small in the whole scheme of it, but you'll really notice the difference in the quality of it. That's okay, there's nothing wrong with those. I just don't drink those straight. They're more something you would use in cocktails. So, you know, hopefully this has been a little bit of a help. I'm trying to rush through this. We got one more speaker here to cover up here. And anyway, so I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions you might have about this. Thanks.
Okay, working, great. We're short on time, so I want to leave time for you to ask questions. So I'm not going to go through my whole presentation. I want to tell you what it was about, so that you'll be able to think about it. And if you want to do this again sometime, we'll do it. But Oaxaca is one of the most interesting parts of Mexico, and as I said, it's an entire state that is known for its diversity of peoples, most especially. This is a map. Here's the ocean down here, and Oaxaca City is right here in the middle of things. It's the capital, and you might have heard of Huatulco or Zipolite or other beach towns that are along the coast. They're not as big and developed as the ones on the Jalisco coast or the Nayarit coast, but they're beautiful beach resorts. But the interesting thing I think about Oaxaca State is that it is home to a third of Mexico's indigenous population. And over a third of Oaxaqueños, of the people who live in the state, speak an indigenous language, such as, you know, you may hear them here, or there might be a restaurateur or a resident in your neighborhood who comes from an area. But in Oaxaca, they're sort of isolated. In Oaxaca, there are all these villages. Enaj was referencing them in the work of Envia. These villages are unique in many ways. Today, Mexico has 2,454 municipalities, and 570, about 1/5 of them, are only in the state of Oaxaca. By the way, that information is from an article that I read recently that our friend Greg Custard wrote, and you might look for that. It's about Oaxaca from Mexico News Daily, and it gives you a good introduction to it. But Oaxaca City or Oaxaca de Juarez is in the center, and it is the capital of the state. And when you visit Oaxaca City, it's fascinating, and it's full of tastes of the many indigenous communities and many influences of centuries of cultures and communities that have lived there. In the restaurants, in the stores, the things that you'll buy in the museums. There are fabulous museums dedicated to textiles, dedicated to graphic arts, and some of the things that have their origins and their specialties in these villages. So, and then you want to. If you visit Oaxaca and you need to stay a week or two, you need to go to these villages and take the tours and see the processes, as Enaj was saying, And VIA sponsors tours to the Tlacalula Valley and to Teotitlan. There are villages within an hour of where you'll be staying that have that specialize in black pottery or red pottery or aprons or a certain kind of embroidery or a certain kind of styles of painting on pottery. They're just, and they're alebrijes, very popular, and probably Mexico's most famous alebrije artists are in the state of Oaxaca and very nearby the main city. So there also are ruins. Monte Alban is fabulous. I can't even describe it in a paragraph, so please look it up, and if you're anywhere near Oaxaca, take a day and go to Monte Alban and tour it. It's fabulous. But there are also ruins in Mitla, there are ruins in Atzompa, there are ruins in Yagul, Dainzu, all within a half an hour to 45 minutes of the centro. So there's many things to do. All right, I'm gonna cut it off there just because we're running out of time. Do we have time for questions, David?
I know.
You can use this one.
Yes, we have time for questions. The one thing I would say first, however, remember we're looking for questions.
Here, come on.
So if you want to share something, please go to our website and sign up to get your own microphone here. So remember, you're asking questions.
Hi, I'm Claude Haya. Do they have bus service from the central to the various towns?
So, am I still on? I'm a total bus rider, and the short answer is yes. But I will tell you, they are not as nice as the buses here in Ajijic. And you have to be careful. I mean, you have to grab on and pull yourself up. Be prepared for maybe bus drivers racing against each other. But yeah, it is a real thrill every day on the bus system in Oaxaca. And they just raised their prices. They're privately owned. They're 10 pesos. Unfortunately, if there's a bloqueo, you're probably not, well, you might be on a bus, but they're going to go around. So, yeah. But yes, the short answer is yes, and you can get to all the towns using that. And if you Google that, you'll find that. They also have colectivos, which are not, they're maroon and white versus the yellow taxis that you would find. But easy to get around. Yep. Just an adventure.
And do know there are many tour companies that have tours to these destinations and they have vans and that sort of thing. It's very easy to find the tour information, either advance online or when you're there. Yes, there's a question here. Oh.
Until your speech, I thought that tequila was just a form of mezcal that was grown in a certain terroir. Is that true, not?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's pretty much exactly right. I mean, the Weber Blue agave that grows within the region of Jalisco makes tequila. That's it. If it's going to be called tequila, it's got to come from a specific place, and it's got to be produced and in a pretty much specific way. And with the agave that you're talking about, that's how it works. Whereas the rest of the world with the agave, I mean, the thing is, what's weird is like cactuses don't follow borders of countries. They just grow on either side. So it's odd when when this state can use it, and then just across the line there's some of the same thing, but they can't use the name mezcal. What you're starting to see more frequently is something called agave spirit, which kind of circumvents a lot of the rules. And it just becomes, so it includes some of those other states.
Hi, this question is for Kay. Kay? I'm right here.
Oh, hey.
Hi. You mentioned an organ society. What exactly is that?
Oh, sure. So the I call it the organs. Yo-Yo is the Historic Organ Society of Oaxaca. What happened? One of the archaeologists, a longtime archaeologist at Monte Alban, his wife Cicely started. She's a musician. She started. Realized that there weren't organs in these churches, fabulous small churches, and so she started this foundation and raised money, and they renovated eight organs, and so you can now go. In fact, the cathedral didn't have an organ for a long time. There's the cathedral and the basilica, and then beautiful Santo Domingo, which is probably the second most beautiful church in Mexico. And it doesn't have an organ. So the proceeds for ours, they use that money to actually teach music students how to play those organs in the church, because these are not organs that you see in your regular church with all the keys. They have what, 44 keys. Dean knows more about this, but that's what it goes to. And you can hear organ concerts a lot in Oaxaca, but during the festival, it's incredible. It's kind of like the Northern Lights Festival here for organs. She brings people in from organists all over the world for this festival that's every other year. Thanks for the question.
Please stand.
Oh, yeah. We're going to Oaxaca at the beginning of April, and I'm wondering if you can recommend. Oh, why are you doing that?
Sorry. It's hot. It's going to be hot. That's all.
Oh,
It's just going to be hot.
What's your question?
My question is, can you recommend a cooking school just for a day?
There are many cooking schools. I don't have one that I particularly want to recommend, but you can also find the information online, and there are Facebook pages, much like there are for Ajijic, for expat visitors, and that's a good resource to check on to find that.
Hey, Kathy, so our friends, it's their fault we're here, and pickleball. Kathy, these guys are big cooks, and I think she's got some information about cooking schools, but we can talk later, and I can tell you.
So we went to a fabulous school that was outside of the centro, that was almost like on a hacienda, beautiful kitchen. It was in Etla, in the valley of Etla, and the woman's name is Susanna Trilling, and she has a bunch of wonderful books about the kinds of recipes that they cook. And we spent at least 2 or 3 times we've been to the school, and it's an all-day kind of affair, and you have a menu, and then you divide up in terms of pairing or a friend or just somebody you don't know, and you choose part of that menu to cook in the school. And then they have all these helpers, like 3 or 4 women, who will assist you in this incredible cocina that they have. And they'll take you outside, and they have these wood-fired ovens, and they'll teach you how to roast tomatoes and how to make tortillas, and then at the end, around 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, then you all sit down together and you eat the food that you've all made, and they teach you how to make moles and different chicken dishes, and it's the Etla Valley, E-T-L-A, Etla Valley.
Okay, we're way over time, so we're going to have 2 very short questions, and then we'll call it a day.
We'll be around afterwards.
Okay, yes, Oaxaca has been the poorest state in Mexico. It's changing. They have built beautiful roads, the federal government finance, but the indigenous do the labor. Okay? Well, I have a question in regard to loans. Does the local population knows about the federal government loans called Tandas de Bienestar? The first loan is 6,000 pesos, and the second loan is 10,000. And we pay 10 payments monthly, 6 pesos, no interest, no credit, it's just one word.
Bueno, yes, Bienestar is a wonderful resource for Mexicans and the indigenous. They provide health care, they provide many things. The women that Envia is loaning to are typically outside that system. they're typically not eligible. I don't know what the eligibility requirements are, but Envia doesn't really have eligibility requirements. You don't have to have collateral, you don't have to have a history, you don't have to have a bank. So Envia has wanted to work with the people who are outside of they're not eligible for traditional loans from big organizations. And so that's Envia, and for women, exclusively women, there's no age requirement. So you can be, there's one woman, she's still in high school. She's starting with a loan to get something. So it's a little different. They work side by side. Bienestar is a vital resource for, I would say, most of the population in Oaxaca. Envia is for a small, involves a small segment. It's not the whole state. It's, one valley, 6 communities, kind of thing.
Why is cacao from Oaxaca stronger than the cacao here in Ajijic?
Well, I love chocolate, but I will tell you, I'm not a cacao expert. I don't know. I think I buy my cacao there, which doesn't have added sugar. It's just cacao powder. So it depends on the process, I would think, and what they're adding to it. I think a lot, I don't know this area well enough, but the chocolate that I've tasted tastes like Abuelita, which is the brand that you buy in the grocery store, which is sweeter. So I think for me, it's because there's not a lot of added sugar. But in Oaxaca, you can go to Mayordomo and you grind it, they make your chocolate however much you say, I want this much sugar, I want almonds or whatever. So it's very, again, like mole, it's a very personal thing. And the other reason too is that in Oaxaca, most people drink chocolate with water. It's not with milk. It's stronger that way too. That's my non-professional answer.
I can't, we're way over, but I can't resist just a final quick question. You all make Oaxaca sound just fabulous.
Oh yeah.
Why are you here? Why did you leave?
The short answer.
Well, I love Oaxaca and I love living there, and you're right. All the things that I was describing, things to do when you vacation, you also do them throughout the year when you're a regular resident. I felt, as a year-round resident, I think my life here will be more comfortable. Oaxaca, like all places that are popular, is changing and growing, and there's more traffic and more noise, and while those things didn't bother me in the past, I think they will in the future. And so I find here, now there's a complete difference, and that's worthy of an entire open circle talk. There are many differences, but the biggest one is that Oaxaca is a city. It's a small city, but it is a city. The population is about 300,000, where Chapala is the biggest city here, and what's the population there? 40,000 or 50,000, I think. So it's a much bigger place. There's much more, not that it's particularly fine, but there's much more infrastructure and whatnot. And it's bigger geography. So.
Okay, well, we'll end it there because we're way over.